January 17, 1945. Hatton, Alsace-Lorraine. The frozen earth cracked beneath steel treads. Snow fell in slow spirals through air thick with cordite and diesel smoke. In the gray light of dawn, a single American tank destroyer sat motionless at the edge of a shattered village, its gun barrels still warm from the night's fighting. Inside, a young staff sergeant from Carbondale, Pennsylvania, pressed his eye to the gun sight one more time. His breath fogged the glass, his hands, blackened with powder residue, steadied on the traversing wheel. Somewhere beyond the veil of falling snow, the German armor was coming again. It had been coming for 3 days. And for 3 days, Audie Murphy had been waiting. But this is not Murphy's story. This is the story of another man. A man whose name would become legend not on foot, not with rifle and grenade, but behind the controls of a machine designed to kill other machines. A man the Germans would come to call der Unzerstörbar, the indestructible. A man who would face the Third Reich's most advanced armor 18 times and emerge victorious every time. A man who redefined what Allied tank crews believed was possible in the hell of mechanized warfare. His name was Lafayette Greenpool, and by the time the war ended, he would be credited with more enemy armor destroyed than any other American tank commander in history. The world did not understand tank warfare in 1940. Not truly. The theorists had written their papers. Guderian had published his doctrines. Fuller and Little Hart had preached mobility and shock. But theory dissolves when steel meets steel. At 1,500 yards, theory means nothing when a Tiger's 88mm gun can punch through your frontal armor before you even hear the shot. The Germans understood this first. They learned it in Poland, where their panzers rolled through cavalry charges and antiquated fortifications like a scythe. Through wheat, they perfected it in France, where 3,000 tanks broke the Maginot Line's flank and sent an entire army fleeing to Dunkirk's beaches. By 1941, German tank doctrine was not theory. It was proven science. It was mathematics written in burned-out holes across 1,000 miles of conquered territory. American tankers arriving in North Africa in 1940 to learn the terrible arithmetic of this new warfare within hours of their first engagement. The M3 Leitol, riveted, mounting a sponson gun that could not traverse, was a rolling coffin against German armor. At Kasserine Pass, American tank battalions were slaughtered. Crews abandoned their vehicles before even engaging the enemy. Some M3 South were found intact, engines still running. Crews simply vanished into the desert rather than face the panzers they knew were coming. The reports that reached the War Department were devastating. American armor was obsolete. American doctrine was flawed. American crews were undertrained and outmatched. The British, veterans of 2 years of desert warfare, were blunt in their assessment. American tankers were brave, but doomed. The Sherman, tank the M4 that would become America's standard medium tank, was arriving in North Africa by late 1942, but even it was outgunned by German heavies. A Sherman 75mm gun could barely scratch a Tiger's frontal armor at combat range. A Tiger could destroy a Sherman from 2,000 yards. The math was simple and brutal. This was the war Lafayette Pool entered in 1942, not the war of propaganda posters, not the war of inevitable Allied victory, but the real war, where American boys climbed into 30-ton steel boxes knowing they were outmatched, outgunned, and quite possibly driving to their deaths. Poole did not look like a legend. He was compact, quiet, with the steady hands of a man who had grown up working machinery on his family's farm in Odom, Georgia. Born in 1919, he had known the Depression's lean years, known what it meant to coax life from reluctant soil and mechanical equipment that had to last, because there was no money for new. He enlisted in the Army before Pearl Harbor, drawn not by patriotic fervor, but by the practical need for steady pay. The tank corps appealed to him for the same reason. Farming had it was about machinery, about understanding how metal and mechanics worked, about the relationship between a man and his equipment. In training, his instructors noticed something unusual. Poole did not simply learn to operate a tank. He understood it. He could sense when the transmission was about to fail by a subtle change in engine pitch. He could estimate range with uncanny accuracy, accounting for terrain, temperature, ammunition, lot variations. Most tankers treated their vehicles as transportation, as armored boxes that carried them to battle. Poole treated his tank as a precision instrument, a tool that could be mastered the way a craftsman masters his trade. By 1944, Poole was a staff sergeant commanding a single Sherman tank. in the 3rd Armored Division's 32nd Armored Regiment. His crew had been together since England gunner Wilbert Richards, loader William Peterson, driver Bert Close, assistant driver Morrison Welch. They had trained together, drunk together, learned each other's rhythms until they functioned as a single organism inside the tank's cramped interior. They called their Sherman In the Mood, after the Glenn Miller song that played constantly on Armed Forces radio. It was a name full of American optimism, a big band swing, and Saturday Night Dances, a name that seemed almost absurd painted on a machine designed for killing. The German tankers they would face had different names for their machines. They named their tigers and panthers after animals: panther, tiger, elephant, names meant to invoke predatory power, or they gave them numerical designations cold as mathematics. There was no music in German tank doctrine, only physics, only the brutal calculus of armor thickness and muzzle velocity. June 6, 1944. Pool's Sherman rolled off a landing craft onto Omaha Beach 3 days after the initial assault. The beach was still littered with the debris of invasion burned out vehicles, abandoned equipment, the temporary graves of men who had died taking this stretch of sand, the smell of death mixed with diesel and sea salt. Pool's crew said nothing as they maneuvered through the wreckage. There was nothing to say. This was the price already paid. Their job was to make sure it meant something. The bocage country of Normandy was hell for armor. Ancient hedgerows, thick as fortress walls and tall as houses, carved the landscape into a maze of tiny fields and sunken roads. Visibility was measured in yards, not miles. A German Panther could sit hull down at the end of a country lane and destroy an entire American column before anyone saw where the shots were coming from. The hedgerows swallowed sound, confused direction, turned every advance into a blind stumble through green-walled corridors, where death waited around every turn. Poole adapted, while other tank commanders charged ahead, following doctrine that emphasized speed and aggression. He moved cautiously, using the terrain the way a hunter uses forest cover. He learned to read the landscape where a hedgerow might conceal an anti-tank gun, which farm buildings offered clear fields of fire, how morning mist settled in low ground and could hide an advancing tank until it was too late. His crew learned to trust his instincts absolutely. When Poole said stop, they stopped. When he said traverse left, the turret swung before anyone else saw the target. His first kill came on June 15th, near Villers Bocage, a German Panzer IV, hull down behind a burning farmhouse. Its commander, confident that smoke and distance made him invisible, Poole saw the flash of binoculars catching sunlight. One flash to seconds, then gone. But it was enough. He calculated angle and distance in his head, gave Richards the firing solution in a voice calm as Sunday morning. The 75 barked once. The Panzer IV's turret rang like a bell, and thick black smoke poured from its hatches. Poole's first kill, documented, verified, witnessed by infantry who had been pinned down by that same Panzer for 40 minutes. The German crew never knew what hit them. That was Poole's method, not dueling, not the stand-up fights that cost American tanks 3-1 casualties, but precision, patience, the understanding that in mechanized warfare, the tank that fires second is usually the tank that dies. But the Germans they faced were not incompetent. This is vital to understand. The myth of Allied tank superiority was exactly that myth. German tankers in 1944 were veterans. Many had survived the Eastern Front, had fought at Kursk and Kharkov, had learned their trade against Soviet armor in battles where hundreds of tanks clashed across the endless steppe. They knew every trick, every technique. They were equipped with the finest tanks in the world: Tigers with armor up to 7 inches thick, Panthers with sloped frontal plates that could deflect American shells like raindrops, muzzle velocities that turned Allied armor into shrapnel at ranges American guns could not match. The Panther, especially, was a revelation to German crews who had fought Soviet T-34s. It was fast, reliable, mounting a long-barreled 7 to 5 millimeter gun that could penetrate any Allied tank. At combat range, a single Panther, properly positioned, could hold an entire crossroads against a battalion. At Aircourt in September 1944, a handful of Panthers destroyed 40 American tanks in a single day. German tank doctrine emphasized these advantages. Their crews were taught to fight defensively, to use superior optics and longer gun range to engage Allied armor. Before it could close to effective range, they were taught to fall back, to trade space for time. to lure American tanks into killing zones where pre-sighted guns could massacre them. And it worked. Throughout the summer of 1944, American tank losses were staggering. Entire companies were wiped out in single engagements. Replacement crews arrived at the front and died within days, sometimes hours. This was a reality Poole faced every time the mood rolled toward the German lines. Not propaganda, not inevitable victory, but mathematics that said he should already be dead. Poole's second kill came 2 days later, then his third and fourth in a single engagement near Saint-La, where the Panthers tried to flank his position, and he destroyed both with 4 shots, total 2 kills, for shells, spacing his fire so precisely that his loader barely had time to slam the breech closed between rounds. By July, other tankers were talking about him. By August, German intelligence had identified his tank by its markings and issued specific orders to target it. When encountered, he was becoming a problem. The thing the Germans did not expect could not have expected was how Poole used their own doctrine against them. He studied every knocked-out German tank he encountered. He measured penetration angles, examined welding seams, learned where armor was thickest and where it was vulnerable. He interviewed infantry who had faced German armor, collected every scrap of intelligence about how Panther and Tiger commanders positioned their vehicles, how they maneuvered, what their blind spots were done, and he learned the single most important truth about German armor. Its crews believed they were invincible. That belief made them predictable. A Panther commander, confident in his armor and gun, would often sit stationary to take a careful shot rather than maneuvering. A Tiger, certain no Allied tank could harm it frontally, would advance without proper reconnaissance. The Germans had built perfect machines and trained expert crews, but perfection breeds confidence, and confidence breeds patterns, and patterns can be exploited by a man patient enough to watch and learn. Poole learned. Every engagement was a lesson. Every knocked-out German tank was a textbook. By September 1944, when the 3rd Armored Division crossed into Germany itself, Poole's kill count stood at 9 confirmed, 9 German tanks destroyed. 9 times he had faced armor superior to his own and won through precision, patience, and an almost supernatural ability to redirect an enemy intention. But 9 was nothing. 9 was just the beginning. The Siegfried Line was supposed to be impregnable. Hitler's West Wall, thousands of bunkers and dragon's teeth anti-tank obstacles, stretching from Switzerland to the Netherlands. American intelligence estimated it would take months to breach, cost tens of thousands of casualties. The Germans defending it were confident. They had reason to be, behind concrete and steel, with prepared fields of fire and pre-sighted artillery. They could bleed the Allies white. Poole's company was tasked with supporting infantry assaults on a fortified village near Aachen. It was textbook combined arms warfare, tanks providing mobile firepower, while infantry cleared buildings and bunkers. But the Germans had positioned Panthers in concealed fighting positions, with overlapping fields of fire. The first American tank to enter the village exploded before anyone saw the shot. The second made it 30 yards further. Its crew burned. Poole had been watching. He had seen the flash from the first Panther's gun, seen the angle, calculated position. He radioed his platoon leader, asked permission to maneuver off the main axis of advance. Permission granted. In the mood back slowly, used a destroyed building for cover, circled through an orchard where the ground was soft enough that his driver had to fight to keep the tank from bogging down. It took 15 minutes to reach the position. Poole wanted a slight rise behind the German position, approached masked by smoke from burning vehicles. The Panther crew never saw him. They were focused forward, watching for American tanks advancing up the main road. Poole's first shot penetrated the Panther's thinner side armor. The German tank shuddered, but did not explode. The crew was well trained, had installed internal fire extinguishers. Poole's second shot, aimed lower, penetrated the engine deck. Smoke, then flame. The crew bailed out, stumbling into withering machine gun fire from American infantry. Poole traversed, searching for the second Panther he knew had to be there. German doctrine never positioned tanks singly. Always pairs, always mutual support. There, a flash of movement, a commander's cupola rotating. Poole fired before the German could traverse. Another hit, another kill. The Panthers destroyed in 90 seconds. The village fell within the hour. His platoon leader, a lieutenant from Michigan who had been in combat for 6 months, approached Poole's tank afterward. "How did you know where they were?" asked Poole, already directing his crew to replenish ammunition, shrugged. "They had to be there. Any other position wouldn't make sense. It was not bravado. It was simply fact. Pohl had read the terrain, understood the tactical situation, and applied logic. The Germans were excellent soldiers, but they followed doctrine, and doctrine could be predicted. By November 1944, Pohl's confirmed kill count was 15. 15 German tanks destroyed Panthers, Mark IVs, and assault guns. No Tigers yet, but Tigers were rare, reserved for critical sectors. Pohl's reputation had spread beyond his division. Tankers from other units asked to meet him, to learn his techniques. War correspondents heard rumors and came looking for the tank commander, who seemed immune to the mathematics of armor warfare. They expected someone larger than life. They found a quiet Georgian who spoke in soft drawl, who spent his few rest hours maintaining his tank personally rather than leaving it to his crew, who could not explain his success except to say that he tried to think like his enemy and be where the enemy didn't expect. The correspondents were disappointed. There was no swagger, no dramatic quotes. Pohl was not Patton or MacArthur, did not understand the performance of command. He was a craftsman, and his craft happened to be killing German tanks. He did it efficiently, without apparent emotion, the way a farmer harvests wheat or a machinist operates a lathe. But his crew understood. They saw how he studied maps for hours before an operation, how he questioned infantry about every detail of terrain, how he never not once took an unnecessary risk with their lives. Other tank commanders got their crews killed through bravado or stupidity. Pohl brought his crew home, night after night, in the mood returned to the maintenance area intact. Other tanks came back shot to pieces or did not come back at all. But Pohl's Sherman always returned. The crew began to believe they were invincible, not because of the tank. They knew the Sherman's weaknesses intimately, but because of the man commanding it. If Pohl said go here, you went. If Pohl said stop, you stopped. His judgment was never wrong. Not once. Not in 50 engagements. December 16, 1944. The Ardennes offensive shattered the winter quiet like an artillery shell through ice. 3 German armies, 28 divisions, over 1,000 armored vehicles, the largest German offensive in the West since 1940. Hitler's desperate gamble to split the Allied armies, recapture Antwerp, force a negotiated peace. The 3rd Armored Division was rushed north to help contain the breakthrough. Pohl's company drove through snow and freezing rain, past columns of refugees and retreating American infantry, toward the sound of guns that never stopped. The weather was impossible, freezing. Fog, snow squalls, visibility measured in yards. Perfect weather for German armor to hide in, to strike from ambush, to use superior optics and thermal sights that American tanks lacked. Pohl's company entered the fight near Houten, Belgium, on December 22nd. The Germans had broken through it. Strength King Tigers from the 506th Heavy Panzer Battalion, Tigers from the 501st, supported by Panthers and assault guns. These were not the battered remnants of shattered divisions. These were elite units, refitted and rested, equipped with Germany's finest armor. Veterans of the Eastern Front who had destroyed more Soviet tanks than Pohl had ever seen. The King Tiger was the most formidable tank in the world. 70 tons, armor up to 7 inches thick, mounting an 88mm gun that could penetrate 14 inches of armor at 1,000 yards. A single King Tiger was worth 5 Shermans in firepower and protection. Allied tank doctrine, when facing King Tigers, was simple: run, call for air support, and hope the weather cleared before the monster killed you. Pohl faced his first King Tiger on December 23rd, in fog so thick he could barely see his own front fenders. The German tank appeared like a ghost, a darker shadow in the gray murk. Massive turret traversing slowly, searching. The King Tiger's commander had not seen in the mood, did not know American armor was within killing range. Pohl knew he had one chance. A frontal shot was useless. The Sherman 75 could not penetrate the King Tiger's frontal armor even at point-blank range, but the German tank was angled slightly, presenting partial side profile. The Tiger's side armor was vulnerable, especially the drive sprockets and suspension. Immobilize it, and infantry could deal with the crew later. Pohl gave Richards the firing solution in a whisper, as if the German crew might hear over the idling engines. Richards centered the sight picture, exhaled, and fired. The 75's crack was shockingly loud in the fog. The tracer seemed to float in slow motion through the murk. Impact. The King Tiger shuddered through a track. Slewed sideways, Pohl fired again, targeting the same area. Another hit. The King Tiger's engine deck began smoking dot, but now the German crew knew where he was. The massive turret began traversing, that 88mm gun swinging toward in the mood like the finger of God. Pohl ordered his driver to reverse at full speed. The Sherman's engine screamed. They crashed backward through a hedgerow, through a stone wall, into a sunken road. Above them, the King Tiger's gun fired where they had been 2 seconds earlier. The shell passed overhead with a sound like ripping canvas and exploded 100 yards behind them. Pohl had damaged but not destroyed a King Tiger. It was immobilized, out of the fight. American infantry would finish it. Pohl marked the location and moved on. His war diary for that day lists the engagement into sentences. Engaged King Tiger at approx. 815 hours. Enemy vehicle immobilized, left for infantry follow-up. 2 sentences for a battle that would have made headlines if anyone had witnessed it. But there were no correspondents in the fog that morning. Only German and American armor, hunting each other through the winter murk, dying or killing in battles no one would record. The pattern of Pohl's success was becoming clear to those who studied such things. He was not the boldest tank commander. He was not the most aggressive. He did not rack up kills through reckless charges or desperate last stands. His method was almost boring in its consistency, reconnaissance, positioning, patience, precision. Where other commanders saw tactical situations, Pohl saw geometry. Every engagement was a problem in angles and timing. He positioned his tank where enemy fire could not reach him, but where his fire could reach them. He used terrain the way a chess master uses board position, always thinking 3 moves ahead, always leaving himself an escape route, always ensuring that if he missed or if more enemy armor appeared, he could disengage without losing his tank or his crew. German tankers who survived encounters with Pohl and German intelligence did track him, did identify his tank by its distinctive markings, reported the same thing. He never fought fair. He never gave them the stand-up duel their training had prepared them for. He appeared from unexpected angles, fired, and vanished before they could respond. He was a ghost, a phantom, and the Germans began to believe the Allied propaganda that American industrial production was so vast they could afford to put their best commanders in multiple tanks simultaneously. How else to explain this single Sherman that appeared everywhere, that seemed to anticipate their movements, that destroyed their armor with mechanical precision and then disappeared? Some German units put out specific warnings. If you encounter the Sherman marked in the mood, do not engage, report position and withdraw. Call for artillery or air support. The tank itself had become dangerous in German consciousness, had taken on mythic qualities. But it was not the tank. It was the man inside it, the quiet Georgian who understood that modern war was not about bravery or aggression but about mathematics, about being in the right position at the right time with the right angle of fire. By January 1945, Pohl's confirmed kill count reached 18 German tanks and assault guns destroyed. The number had to be confirmed, verified by multiple witnesses, preferably with photographic evidence. Pohl's company commander knew the actual count was higher, knew there were kills made in the fog or smoke where no one could verify. But 18 was the official number. 18 confirmed kills made Lafayette Pohl the highest scoring American tank ace in history. No other American commander came close. Some British and Soviet tankers had higher counts, but they had been fighting since 1941. Pohl had achieved his record in 7 months of combat. The Army wanted to pull him out, send him home for war bond drives, make him a symbol. He refused. His crew refused. They had survived together, had fought across France and Belgium and into Germany itself. They would finish the war together. But the mathematics of war is cruel and certain. You can be perfect 17 times, 18 times, 100 times. The 101st time, perfection fails. The law of averages has no mercy, no respect for skill or courage. Eventually, the numbers catch up. Eventually, every warrior faces a battle he cannot win through skill alone. January 30th, 1945. Near Sturpini, Belgium, the Ardennes offensive had been defeated, but German armor was still retreating, in good order, still fighting rearguard actions, still deadly. Pohl's company was advancing through rolling hills when they encountered a well-prepared German position, Panthers, and assault guns dug in with infantry support, covering a key crossroads. Pohl maneuvered as always, looking for the flank, the unexpected angle. He found a sunken road that would bring him to the German position from the side. And the mood rolled forward, slow and careful. Pohl's head was out of the commander's cupola, scanning terrain, reading the landscape the way a man reads a familiar book. He did not see the German infantryman with the Panzerfaust, the disposable anti-tank rocket that German soldiers carried by the thousands. The German had concealed himself in a roadside ditch, covered in snow and debris, invisible. He waited until the mood was 30 feet away, point-blank range, no chance of missing. Asterisk, the Panzerfaust hollow-charged warhead struck in the mood's left side, just below the turret ring. The explosion penetrated the armor, filled the crew compartment with fire and shrapnel. Pohl, exposed in the commander's cupola, took the full force of the blast. The tank swerved, crashed into a ditch, engines still running. The crew, wounded but alive, pulled themselves out of the burning Sherman. They pulled Pohl out last. He was alive, conscious, but hurt badly. Both legs shattered, severe burns, internal injuries. The medics who reached him minutes later did not think he would survive the evacuation. And the mood burned for 2 hours. When it finally exploded, ammunition cooking off in secondary blasts, tankers from other companies stood and watched in silence. They were not watching a tank burn. They were watching the end of an era, the death of invincibility. Pohl survived. The doctors in field hospitals and evacuation centers could not explain how, could not understand how a man with his injuries lived through the first night, let alone the first week. He was evacuated to England, then to the United States, spent a year in hospitals undergoing surgery after surgery. He would never walk without a cane. He would never be free of pain. His war was over. The Germans he had fought would have called it fate, karma, the inevitable justice that comes for all warriors. The Americans called it bad luck. Pohl himself, in later years, called it mathematics. You can only roll the dice so many times, he told an interviewer in 1952. Every time you go out, the odds are against you. I rolled 18 times and won. The 19th time, I lost. That's just arithmetic, but the record remained, 18. Confirmed kills, the highest scoring American tank ace in history. No one surpassed it during the war. No one has surpassed it since. Pohl's methods were studied, taught, incorporated into tank warfare doctrine. His understanding that armored combat was about positioning and precision rather than bravery and aggression changed how American tankers fought. The Germans who survived the war, who returned to shattered cities and defeated dreams, brought back stories of the American tank that could not be killed. Der Unzerstörbar, the indestructible. They spoke of him in the same tones they used for their own aces, with the same respect they gave to Michael Whitman or Otto Carius. Enemy, yes, but a warrior of the highest order. The symbolic object in Pohl's story is not dramatic. It is not a flag or a weapon or a piece of precious metal. It is the gunner's sight, that simple piece of optical equipment that every tank carried, that every gunner peered through 1,000 times a day in German hands. The gunner's sight was backed by superior optics, by rangefinders and by tanks, designed around the principle of outranging the enemy, killing from distances where return fire was impossible. In Pohl's hands, that same piece of equipment became something else. It became the equalizer. It was not the sight itself, but how he used it. The understanding that warfare is geometry, that position and angle matter more than armor thickness or gun caliber. The sight was symbol of democracy's advantage, not superior equipment, but superior thinking, not better machines, but better application of adequate machines. Every German tanker Pohl faced had equipment advantages, better armor, better guns, better optics. But Pohl had something they lacked, the flexibility that comes from understanding. That doctrine is a guide, not a law. That improvisation and adaptation are strengths, not weaknesses. That a man who understands principles can defeat an enemy who only understands procedures. This was America's advantage in miniature, not the industrial production, though that mattered, not the numerical superiority, though that helped, but the cultural willingness to question doctrine, to adapt, to allow a Georgia farm boy with no formal military education to rewrite tank tactics through practical application rather than theoretical study. Asterisk. The epilogue writes itself. Across the decades that followed, Pohl returned to Georgia, to his farm, to a quiet life. He never spoke much about the war. Visitors expecting war stories got farming advice. Correspondents seeking drama got polite deflection. The man who had been der Unzerstörbar became simply Lafayette Poole, farmer, husband, father. He died in 1991, age 71, having lived a full life despite injuries doctors said would kill him within months. His funeral was attended by surviving members of his crewmen who had followed him across Europe, who had trusted him with their lives, who had come home because of his skill and his care. They carried his casket, these old men who had been young tankers once, and they did not speak of kills or glory. They spoke of how he had brought them home, how he had cared for them, how he had been not just a commander, but a protector. The record remains, 18 confirmed kills, the highest score in American tank ace. The man the Germans called unkillable, until the day he wasn't. But records are just numbers, and numbers are just mathematics. The truth lies deeper, in what Poole represented the triumph of skill over superiority, of intelligence over force, of the principle that war is not won by those with the best equipment, but by those who use adequate equipment with exceptional understanding. In the archives of German military intelligence, captured after the war, there is a report dated February 1945. It analyzes American tank tactics, specifically the phenomenon of individual American commanders who achieved disproportionate success despite equipment disadvantage. Poole is mentioned by name. The analysis concludes that American tactical flexibility, the willingness to deviate from doctrine and adapt to circumstances, represented a significant challenge to German operational planning. The report's author, an intelligence officer who would survive the war and become a NATO defense analyst, wrote a final assessment that serves as fitting epitaph. The American tanker Poole demonstrated that in modern warfare, the human element remains decisive, superior. Equipment cannot compensate for rigid thinking. The Americans understood this. We did not, and it cost us the war. 18 tanks, 1 man, 1 crew, 1 Sherman named for a swing dance song, carrying boys from Pennsylvania and Michigan and Georgia into battles where mathematics said they should die. But mathematics cannot account for human will, cannot measure skill or judgment or the quiet courage of men who rolled the dice 19 times knowing the odds, doing their duty anyway, accepting both victory and defeat with equal grace. Lafayette Poole taught the Germans that American armor was not invincible. It was something more dangerous. It was unpredictable, adaptable, commanded by men who fought not from doctrine, but from principle, not from training, but from understanding. In the end, that made all the difference. In the end, that changed the world. The war ended. The tanks fell silent. But the lesson remained, carved in the burned-out hulls of 18 German tanks across the battlefields of Western Europe. That freedom's advantage is not strength, but flexibility, not power, but intelligence, not the size of the gun, but the skill of the gunner who aims at dot. And on a Georgia farm, an old man with a cane walked his land in the evening light, remembering nothing and everything, carrying within him the knowledge that he had done what was required, no more and no less, and had survived to see his grandchildren play in the peace his war had purchased. That was victory enough. That was the only victory that mattered. Der Unzerstörbar, the indestructible, not because he could not be hurt, but because what he represented, the thinking warrior, the adaptive soldier, the man who mastered his craft and used it with precision and care, could never be defeated, not by superior equipment, not by doctrine, not by the mathematics of war. In the end, Lafayette Green Poole destroyed 18 German tanks and helped destroy the idea that technological superiority wins wars. Ideas matter more than armor. Understanding matters more than firepower. And one man, in the right place at the right time with the right judgment, can change the course of battles and the lesson of history itself. Asterisk.